The wind howled through the broken shutters of the McRae barn, sweeping hay and dust into wild spirals like ghosts trapped in a stampede. Outside, the last sun of November was bleeding behind the high buttes of Santa Florencia. The day was dying cold and quick. Delilah McRae stood in the doorway of the barn, her gloved hands curled around a broken halter. She hadn't said a word in 10 minutes, not since the last rider left, in a flurry of boots and thinly veiled threats. "Governor's daughter, my ass," she muttered under her breath. The halter creaked as her grip tightened. "That girl's got a head like wet flour and a smile as sharp as a butter knife." Maisie Carter, standing nearby, didn't speak. The housekeeper had learned long ago that when Delilah muttered like that, she was either about to shoot something or tear it down with words, and both were equally dangerous. "She said she don't eat meat off the bone," Delilah continued. "Does she think this ranch runs on lemon cakes and lace? You think Elias is going to settle for a girl who can't tell a cow from a chair?" Maisie cleared her throat softly. "They're just trying to tie up power, ma'am. You know that. Marrying into the governor's family would make the McRae name bulletproof." Delilah turned to face her face, hard eyes unreadable. "A name can open doors." "Maisie," she said low, "but it won't keep the wind out." "You hear, Kim?" Maisie nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Inside the house, the fire snapped sharp in the parlor as Elias McRae poured himself a glass of rye. His cavalry coat was slung over the chair. Dust still clung to the hem. He hadn't been home a full day, and already his mother was plotting weddings like chess moves. He downed the rye and stared into the fire. "She doesn't even know what I believe in," he thought. "Hell does anybody." The door opened behind him, and he didn't have to turn to know who it was. "She brought pie," Delilah said, voice dry. "Did she?" Elias replied, not moving. "I'd have thought someone like her wouldn't risk burning her hands." Delilah crossed the room slowly, her boots clicking across the hardwood floor, the rhythm steady, unshaken. "They're serious about this match. Briggs says the governor's already drawing up the papers." Elias turned then. His face was calm, but his jaw was tight. "Papers?" he asked. "You signing off on my life now?" Delilah didn't blink. "It ain't just your life. It's the ranch. It's everything we built." "I didn't build this," he snapped. "You did. And Pa. You bled for it. I just wore a uniform and rode back to find my name married off like a damn cattle brand." Delilah took a deep breath, the kind that was supposed to calm things, but never quite did. "You don't have to love her, Elias. You just have to stand beside her. Make the right kind of noise in town. We can't afford to be soft right now." Elias laughed, short, bitter. "You think I'm soft?" "I think you're proud," she said. "And pride don't feed the cattle." He stepped forward. "What about dignity? What about choosing someone who asks me who I am, not just what I'm worth?" Delilah looked at him then, not as her son, not as an heir, but as a man tired to the bone. His eyes, so much like his father's, held more weight than a dozen contracts. She didn't answer right away. "I'm not marrying a map mother," he said softer now. "I need someone who knows how to walk beside me, not where I should stand." And with that he walked past her, the glass still half full in his hand. Later that night, Delilah sat alone at the big kitchen table. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that screams at people who once had noise to fill it. She ran her fingers along a crack in the table, thinking of the dozens of men who had sat there looking to her for orders. Ranch hands, land buyers, cattlemen, lawyers, men with ideas and no spines. But Elias? He had a spine, and he wasn't wrong. Maisie entered quietly, carrying a pot of black coffee, and set it down. I raised him wrong, Delilah said, eyes on the crack. Maisie poured 2 cups. You raised him strong. There's a difference. I raised him like a man. Should have raised him like a soldier. He came back a soldier, ma'am. But he wants to be something more. That's not wrong. Delilah stared at the steam curling from the cup. When I married Hank, I didn't love him yet. I respected him. It was enough. Maisie smiled faintly. Maybe the world's changed since then. Delilah chuckled bitter again. The world's always changing, but the wind's just as cold. The next morning, Delilah rode out before dawn. Not with a saddle polished and proper, but on an old mule named King, wearing a coat 2 sizes too big and a hat that didn't match her usual poise. Maisie rode behind quiet. They rode down past the western edge of town, where the dust got thicker and the road bent into alleyways of half-burnt cabins and patches of stray goats. Delilah's eyes scanned faces, tired women boys with empty buckets, men already drunk. Then she saw her. A girl, barely 20, dark braids tucked under a red scarf, kneeling to give a crust of corn cake to an old Navajo man with frost-bitten fingers. She didn't look up. She didn't ask for thanks. Delilah slowed King to a stop. That her Maisie asked, leaning slightly forward. I don't know, Delilah whispered. But she didn't hesitate. The girl stood up, dusted her skirt, and moved on down the street. Delilah watched her walk. Her steps weren't quick, but they were steady, like someone who knew exactly how much her feet weighed. Back at the ranch, Elias stood on the porch watching the dust settle beyond the fences. He heard hoofbeats behind him but didn't turn. Delilah dismounted and came up beside him. There's a girl down by the tannery, she said. Name's Rosa Navarro. Might come help in the kitchen for a while. Elias didn't look at her. You hiring help now? No, she said. I'm looking for someone who knows the wind. He finally turned. You've gone soft, Mama. Delilah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of watching strong boys become hollow men. He didn't answer, but the silence wasn't cold this time. The wind bit harder on the ridge that morning, a dry slap of dust and cold across the face. Elias McRae stood at the edge of the northern pasture, one boot on the bottom rail of the fence, watching a stubborn calf refuse to follow the herd. It bucked, twisted, then sat down like it had decided the day could go on without it. He understood the feeling. Behind him, hoofbeats approached, slow and familiar. He didn't have to turn. You've been out here since dawn, Delilah's voice came firm but not sharp. Before that, Elias answered. The world don't care what time a man wakes up, but the cows sure do. Delilah dismounted, tying her reins loose to the fence. She didn't say anything for a moment, just looked out at the field, the low line of hills in the distance, the herd kicking dust along the dry earth. I was your age when your daddy died, she said finally. You know that, Elias nodded. You took over the ranch and never let another man tell you what to do. I let plenty of men think they were telling me, she said, smirking. That's different. He glanced sideways at her, suspicious. You didn't ride all the way out here to talk about Pa. No, I didn't. She exhaled, her breath smoky in the cold. I came to tell you the governor's wife wired me again this morning. They want to set a date. Elias stepped off the rail, brushing hay from his trousers. Tell them to set it without me. Delilah's jaw stiffened. Elias, no. He cut her off. I won't do it, Mama. I won't marry a woman who thinks dirt is something you beat out of a rug. I won't tie my life to someone who sees this place like a stepping stone. Delilah's eyes narrowed. You think I don't know what's at stake, and I think you've forgotten what it's like to have a choice. That hung there between them, heavy as old snow. She crossed her arms. You think this life was ever mine to choose when Hank died. I had a baby in one hand and a ranch in the other, and men waiting to steal both. Elias's voice dropped. You think I don't see that I do. Every damn day. And I respect the hell out of you for it. But I ain't Hank. And I'm not some breeding stallion you can hitch to another man's ambition. Delilah's expression cracked just slightly. This marriage would make things easier. For the ranch. For you. Easier, Elias scoffed. Mama, I won't marry a map. Delilah blinked. A what? A map, he said. A name, a direction, a connection. I need someone who knows how to walk beside me, not where I should stand. The wind kicked up dust between them. I ain't saying she's a bad person, Elias continued. But when she visited, she looked around the stables like we were a zoo. She asked if the chickens laid actual eggs. Who the hell else would lay them? The horse, Delilah, cracked a reluctant smile. But it didn't last long. She's polished, she said quietly. They raised her to be the wife of someone important. Exactly. Elias pointed at her. Raised, coached. She's a script in a silk dress. He stepped closer, dropping his voice. The kind of woman I'd marry. She's the kind who wouldn't blink at a storm. The kind who knows how to start a fire in the rain and doesn't cry if her dress rips on a nail. I want someone real. Delilah said nothing. For a long moment she looked at her son. Really looked. He wasn't a boy anymore. War had carved lines around his eyes. Loss had made his voice heavier. There was no more room in him for pretending. I just want you to be safe, she said finally. I know, Elias replied. But safety without soul. That's just a prison with prettier curtains. Delilah looked back toward the herd. The stubborn calf had finally rejoined the group, nudged forward by an old cow with more patience than sense. What if she said slowly, what if there was someone who was real, someone not on any list, not invited to tea, not from any of those dinner tables where folks speak more about land than love? Elias frowned. You got someone in mind? Delilah didn't answer directly. Not yet, she said. But I'm starting to think we've been looking in the wrong direction. He studied her face, the set of her mouth, the light behind her words. You're up to something, he muttered. Always, she said. I just make it look like it's your idea. Back at the ranch house, Delilah sat at her desk, staring at a leather-bound ledger she had no intention of reading. Maisie stood by the doorway holding a tray with 2 fresh cups of coffee. He said it, Maisie asked. Delilah nodded. He said it. Out loud, clear as daylight. I won't marry a map. That boy's heart is more stubborn than his daddy's back ever was. Maisie set the tray down. So what now? Delilah leaned back, cracking her knuckles. Now I stop thinking like a rancher and start thinking like a mother. Maisie raised an eyebrow. That's not how you usually roll. No, Delilah said. But maybe it's time. She reached into the drawer and pulled out an old kerchief, worn stained and folded 3 times. She rubbed her thumb across it, lost in memory. I remember what it was like before I had this name, she said. Back when I was Delilah from nowhere, with 1 pair of boots and no one to back me. Maisie tilted her head. You miss her, Delilah's eyes softened. Sometimes. She made fewer mistakes. There was silence again. Then, there's a girl down near the slaughterhouse, Delilah said. I saw her yesterday. Gave half her lunch to a man with no fingers. Didn't even wait for a thank you. You want her at the ranch? Maisie asked, cautious. I want to see her, Delilah replied. See how she works, how she thinks, if she flinches when someone yells or if she holds steady. Maisie nodded. You want me to reach out? Quiet no, Delilah said. I'll do it myself. Maisie blinked. You sure? Delilah stood up, folding the kerchief once more. Maisie, it's time we stop hiring names and start hiring souls. That night, Elias sat on the porch again, watching the sky turn from violet to ink. He could hear the coyotes calling out in the distant hills. Somewhere behind him, his mother was moving in the house, but different. Quieter. Lighter. He rubbed his jaw and exhaled through his nose. Who the hell's down near the slaughterhouse, he muttered to himself. He didn't know it yet, but the answer would walk through the gates of Three Cross in less than a week, with dust on her boots and fire in her eyes. The morning broke pale and bitter with a sky the color of old tin. In the lower quarter of Santa Florencia, the streets didn't wake with sunlight. They stirred with clatter. Chickens squawked. Boots hit frozen dirt. And Rosa Navarro stood in a line of women waiting for offcuts and bones from the slaughterhouse bins. The butcher didn't speak. He never did. He just tossed what he didn't want into burlap sacks while the women scrambled elbows, sharp pride tucked deep in their skirts. Rosa didn't scramble. She waited. If there was anything left by the time it reached her, she'd take it. If not, she'd go without. She always had. Her hands were raw from the cold fingers, red and cracked beneath the worn gloves she'd mended 3 winters ago. She looked over her shoulder, scanning for Lita, her younger sister, who sat curled in a shawl beside a stack of crates. A cough rattled from Lita's lungs, hollow and dry, the kind that scared Rosa more than silence. She looked back to the front of the line just in time to see a man shove a Navajo elder out of the way, grabbing 2 sacks instead of 1. Hey, Rosa snapped, stepping forward. That wasn't yours. The man turned, sneering. Then go ahead and take it, sweetheart. Let's see you fight for it. The women nearby turned away. No one wanted to get involved. No one ever did. Rosa didn't move. She didn't flinch. I wasn't taught to stay quiet when someone's being kicked, she said. The man held her gaze for a second, waiting for her to blink. She didn't. He spat on the ground, tossed the second sack at her feet, and stalked off. The elder gave her a nod of quiet thanks. She nodded back, stooped to grab the sack, then paused. She tore it open, pulled out a slab of fat-streaked meat, and handed it to him. You need it more, she said. The crowd moved on. Life resumed, like it always did. But from across the street, 2 eyes had been watching. Delilah McRae, bundled in an old canvas coat and a scarf that covered most of her face, leaned against a post outside the tannery. She didn't look like a ranch baroness today. She looked like a woman who hadn't had a warm bed in a week. Beside her, Maisie Carter blended just as easily, though her hands twitched every time someone brushed too close. Delilah didn't speak as Rosa walked past them. Just watched the way her boots hit the dirt, the way she helped her sister up without fuss or dramatics, the way she carried her half-empty sack like it was full. Maisie glanced sideways. That her, Delilah nodded. She didn't even hesitate. They trailed her through the crooked alleys and smoke-choked corners of town, keeping distance. Rosa stopped twice, once to cough into her scarf, and once to hand a pair of coins to a blind street fiddler who hadn't played a note in days. When she reached her shack, the roof sagging and patched with flour sacks, she held the door open for Lita and stepped inside without looking back. Delilah exhaled. The breath froze in front of her. I want her at the ranch, she said. Maisie furrowed her brow. As what? Doesn't matter. I want her close. You think she's the one? I think Delilah said slowly. She doesn't flinch when it matters. I've known women with silk sheets and nothing behind their eyes. This one, she's got something. Maisie hesitated. We offering her work or testing her both? 3 days later, Rosa was summoned to the tannery by a wiry man with a limp and a badge made of tin. He said someone at the big ranch was looking for help. Kitchen work. Laundry, maybe, if she wanted it. Rosa didn't ask questions. She knew what happened when you turned down work in a town like this. You didn't get asked again. The next morning, she dressed in her cleanest clothes, still faded and stitched in too many places, but clean. She kissed Lita's forehead, promised she'd come back before dusk, and walked the 6 miles to Three Cross Ranch with the dust in her boots and nothing in her pockets. At the gate, she was met by Maisie, who didn't smile but didn't scowl either. Name, she asked. Rosa Navarro. Ever worked a kitchen? Yes, ma'am. Ever lie only when it's raining and I say I'm not cold? Maisie blinked. A grin tugged the corner of her mouth, then vanished. Come on. They passed the stables lined with bay and roan geldings and the smokehouse where a man stirred coals and sang low in Spanish. Rosa took it in silently, counting the steps, the corners, the exits. Habit. Maisie led her to the rear of the house where steam rose from a copper sink and 3 women peeled potatoes like they were paid by the slice. Rosa rolled up her sleeves without being asked. No one welcomed her. That was fine. She hadn't come for welcome. Hours passed. She peeled, chopped, boiled, scrubbed. She kept her head down, but her eyes missed nothing. She noticed how the cook favored her left hip, how the older maid hid coins in her apron, how the pantry door stuck on cold mornings. Near dusk, her hands raw again and her stomach empty, she was called to deliver a bundle of folded linens to the West Wing. She was warned, don't talk, don't stare, don't slow down. She didn't intend to do any of those things. She walked the long hallway past polished wood and portraits of dead men trying not to leave smudges on the walls. As she turned the corner near the study, a loose plank caught her boot. The bundle slipped from her arms, linens tumbling across the floor. She knelt quickly, cheeks hot. Damn it, she whispered, reaching for the nearest cloth. Boots stopped beside her. Shined clean. Not work boots. She looked up. A man stood over her broad shoulders, uniform shirt open at the collar, face unreadable but not unkind. He knelt beside her. Easy, he said, helping gather the linens. Floor's colder than it looks. Rosa blinked, surprised. I got it. I know he said. But I'm here anyway. Their hands brushed once. Just once. She stood, bundle back in her arms. Sorry. He nodded. Don't be. She turned and walked off. He watched her go. Elias McRae didn't know her name. Not yet. But something about the way she walked, steady, unhurried, like she'd already walked through worse, caught him and held. Back in the kitchen, Rosa exhaled for the first time all day. She didn't know who he was. Not yet. But something in his eyes hadn't looked at her like a maid, and that unsettled her more than anything else had. The storm came just after breakfast, sweeping in low, from the eastern ridge, dragging dust and sleet like a curse. Workers scrambled to cover tools and tie down tarps. Horses grew restless in their stalls. Inside the Three Cross kitchen, the windows rattled, and the cook barked orders over the roar of the wind. Rosa moved through the noise without flinching. She had already scrubbed the back tables and stacked the chipped dishware, her fingers numb from the pump water and the chill that crept through every gap in the walls. Her arms ached, her neck stiff, but none of that showed on her face. That was something she'd learned young, never let the work see, it had beaten you. She was ladling stew into a dented pot when she heard the argument outside. Two men. One voice sharp, the other slurred. Then a thud. A scuffle. Something breaking. She moved fast. Out the back door, rain stinging her face, she found the stable hand Miguel, a boy no older than 17, on the ground. Over him stood a man Rosa didn't recognize. Tall, broad, with a sheriff's badge pinned crooked on his chest and whiskey on his breath. His boot was pressed into Miguel's shoulder. "You lie again, I'll crack your damn teeth," he growled. Rosa stepped forward without thinking. "Hey." The man looked up, startled. "Get back inside, girl." "No," Rosa said, voice steady. "You're standing on a boy who ain't fighting you. He lied to me. Stole a saddle tag last week. Don't concern you." She didn't move. "Then why didn't you go through the proper channels?" he sneered. "Because when someone steals from my station, I don't write letters. I fix it." She looked down at Miguel, who shook his head faintly. He hadn't taken anything, that much was clear. The rain made everything louder, meaner. Rosa stepped closer. "I wasn't taught to stay quiet when someone's being kicked." The sheriff stared at her like she'd grown horns. "You're new," he said. "Not that new." He stepped off Miguel slowly. "You got a lot of nerve for a maid." Rosa held his gaze. "You got a badge, not a crown." His eyes narrowed. "What's your name, Rosa Navarro?" He froze. Just a second. But she saw it, the pause, the flicker of recognition behind his pupils. He turned, walked off without another word. Miguel sat up, wincing. "You're gonna get yourself fired," he muttered. Maybe Rosa said, offering her hand. "But you don't let men like that think fear's still cheap." Back inside, she dried off in the storage room, her dress soaked to her knees, her hair dripping onto the dusty floor. She changed in silence, trying not to let the cold burrow too deep. She didn't see Delilah standing in the hallway. The older woman watched through the cracked door, arms folded, eyes unreadable. When Rosa stepped out, startled, Delilah simply said, "Storm's settling." Rosa nodded, unsure of what had been heard. "Yes, ma'am." Delilah looked her over. "Maisie tells me you've been steady. Never complain. Never ask for favors." "I'm here to work," Rosa said. I noticed Delilah replied. There was something in her tone, not quite praise, not quite suspicion. She walked past, Rosa stopped, then turned. "That was Briggs out there, wasn't it?" Rosa hesitated. "Yes. He bother you?" "Not me." Delilah's gaze sharpened. "But you still stepped in." Rosa lifted her chin. "He stepped too far." "I don't care who he is." Delilah nodded once, slow. "Good." She didn't explain why it was good. She just walked on. That night the rain let up, but the wind kept howling. In the bunkhouse, the girls whispered about Rosa, some admiring, some afraid. Standing up to a sheriff wasn't something folks did unless they had someone powerful behind them. Rosa didn't sleep much. She lay on the cot, listening to the wind, thinking of Lita, of her father's old voice telling her to never step backward unless it was to swing. The next morning she found a slip of paper pinned to her work apron. "Deliver clean linens to the West Wing. Study." Noon. She frowned. It was the same place she'd gone the week before, the same hallway, the same damn floorboard that had tripped her. She climbed the stairs, bundle in hand, breath steady. When she reached the study door, it was open. Inside, Elias McRae stood by the window reading something he didn't seem interested in. He didn't look up when she entered. She cleared her throat. "Fresh linens, sir." He glanced over. "You always pick fights with lawmen, or was today special?" She froze. "You heard I hear most things around here." Eventually, she set the bundle down on a side table. He was wrong. That boy didn't deserve it. I didn't say he did. She nodded. Then we're square. He smiled faintly. You're not like the others. Rosa crossed her arms. I didn't come here to be like anyone. Elias tilted his head. No. I don't suppose you did. There was a pause. You know, he said, stepping closer, people think this ranch is a ladder. You climb it, you get closer to power. But power here is like water in your hands, real easy to lose if you squeeze too hard. She didn't blink. I don't want power. Then what do you want? Rosa hesitated, caught off guard. No one asked her that. Not ever. To keep my sister fed. To sleep without checking the door 3 times. To not owe anyone. Elias nodded quiet. That's a better answer than I've heard in a long time. She turned to leave, hand on the door. Rosa, he said. She looked back. You stood still when others looked away. That means something here. She didn't answer, just gave a slight nod and left. Back downstairs, Delilah was waiting near the staircase. She's not afraid of you, she told her son. No, Elias said, and that's the most dangerous thing of all. Delilah raised an eyebrow. Dangerous to her or to you? He didn't respond. But as Rosa crossed the courtyard toward the laundry house, a new rider entered the ranch. Sheriff Briggs, stiff in his saddle, holding a paper under his coat. Delilah watched him from the porch, lips pressed tight. There were old names buried under this ranch, and it seemed one of them just got dug back up. The sun returned the next morning, pale and tentative. It scattered across the valley like someone unsure they were welcome. The wind had calmed, but the ground was still slick with mud, and the ranch smelled of wet leather hay and smoke. The kind of smell that sticks to your bones no matter how many times you wash. Rosa stood at the edge of the bunkhouse steps, a folded bundle of sheets pressed to her hip. Her boots were already soaked through the mud, sucking at her soles with every step. She didn't complain. She never did. She had more important things to carry than discomfort. Behind her, one of the girls hissed under her breath. Better not drop anything this time. Rosa didn't turn around. She walked. The West Wing loomed like it belonged in another world. Its halls were wider, quieter, the walls lined with oil paintings and polished wood that reflected back your own discomfort. Rosa walked carefully now, not out of fear, but because she knew what these halls meant to the people who lived in them. They weren't just rooms, they were declarations. She passed under the arched threshold and spotted a boot print left in the drying mud. Large, clean heel, military cut. Elias McRae. Of course. Rosa hadn't seen him since their brief exchange in the study, and even then she wasn't sure what that had been. Curiosity, pity, she didn't have time to wonder. Not when Lita's cough was worse and the medicine the clinic gave them was nothing but colored water and false hope. As she rounded the corner, the floor dipped again, the same warped plank that had sent her linens flying before. She stepped over it this time. No mistakes. She reached the door to the study and raised her hand to knock when it opened on its own. Elias stood inside, holding a ledger in one hand and a mug in the other. He looked tired but sharper somehow, like he'd been thinking all night and hadn't quite made peace with whatever conclusions he came to. Rosa lowered her hand. I brought the linens, she said. He nodded. Come in. She stepped inside, the warmth of the fire biting pleasantly at her wet sleeves. You're early, he said, setting the ledger down. I thought I'd beat the mud. Smart. She crossed to the small cabinet near the far wall and opened it carefully, stacking the fresh sheets inside. As she worked, Elias watched her not in the way men usually watched with hunger or assumptions, but like someone trying to read handwriting in the dark. "You grew up around here?" he asked. Rosa paused. "A few miles east. Used to be farmland before the drought killed everything." "Your family gone," she said. "Except my sister. You're raising her, I'm keeping her alive." "Not sure that counts as raising." Elias took a sip of his coffee and nodded. "That's more than most people do." She turned her eyes, catching his for a moment. "Why are you asking?" "Because most of the folks who end up at Three Cross are running from something, or towards something. Just trying to figure out which one you are." Rosa shrugged. "Maybe both." A silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but not entirely safe either. "You don't act like you're afraid of this place," Elias said. "I've been in places worse than this. You don't flinch when people talk down to you. I've been spoken to worse than this." He tilted his head. "You've got backbone." "I didn't come here to impress you." "Didn't say you did." Another beat of quiet. Then Rosa stepped toward the door. "I should get back to the washroom." Elias took a step forward. "Rosa, wait." She paused. He hesitated, then asked, "What would you do if you didn't have to worry about money, your sister, any of it?" She turned slowly. "I don't play that game." "Why not?" "Because it's a waste of time. That kind of thinking. It's like wishing for rain in a drought. Doesn't change a damn thing." He didn't push, just nodded. She left without another word. Out in the yard, the sun had risen just high enough to warm the backs of the horses in the paddock. Rosa made her way to the laundry lines behind the bunkhouse. The mud grabbed at her again, but this time she walked through it like it wasn't even there. Maisie met her by the lines with a wooden tub of clean shirts. "You took long," Maisie said. "He talks too much," Rosa replied. Maisie chuckled. "That he does." She handed Rosa the tub. "Boss lady says you're on stable rotation next week." Rosa blinked. "I thought I was house duty." "You've earned more." "I didn't ask for more." "Didn't have to." Rosa didn't answer. She just lifted the tub and went back to work, but her mind wasn't on the linens anymore. It was on that question. What would you do if you didn't have to worry about anything? She didn't like how much it stuck with her. That night, Rosa stayed late folding sheets under lantern light. When she stepped out into the night air, she saw a figure near the paddocks. Elias again standing with one hand resting on the fence rail, watching the horizon. She almost turned back, but he looked over and caught her before she could. "You ever sleep?" he asked. Rosa stepped forward. "You ever stop thinking?" He smiled. "Touché." She leaned against the fence, not quite close enough to make it familiar, but near enough to suggest she wasn't in a hurry to leave. "The house," she said after a moment. "It's too quiet. It don't feel lived in." Elias looked over. "It's full of people. Still feels empty." He nodded. "It does." Neither of them spoke for a while. The stars above spread wide, bold and cold. Then quietly she said, "If this place has gold floors, it don't scare me. I came to work, not to stare." Elias turned to her, something new in his eyes. Not pity, not curiosity. Maybe respect. Maybe the beginning of something neither of them could name yet. He didn't reply. He didn't have to. They stood there a little longer, two people pretending they were just looking at the horses, not at each other. But across the yard, hidden behind the curtain of the east window, Delilah McRae watched everything. And in town, Sheriff Briggs unfolded a slip of paper with the name Navarro scrawled across the top. The past had a long memory, and it was starting to stir. The next morning, the ranch was slow to wake. A thick fog had rolled in from the river overnight, curling around the barns and creeping over the fence posts like it had business here. The air was still almost reverent, like the land was holding its breath. Rosa stood at the hitching post behind the stable, rolling bandages onto a gelding's cracked leg. She worked quietly, like always, steady hands, no wasted motion. The fog muffled the usual sounds of clanging buckets and shouting cowhands. Today felt different. She felt it in her ribs before she could explain it. A soft crunch behind her. Boots in the dirt. She didn't turn. "If you're looking for small talk, you came to the wrong girl." "I'm not," came Elias's voice. "I'm just trying to learn how to be quiet around the right people." Rosa smirked, but kept working. "You're not bad at it." He leaned against the gate. "You ever think about leaving every damn day?" she said, tightening the wrap. "But leaving ain't the hard part." He tilted his head. "Then what is knowing when not to run?" She looked up, then eyes meeting his across the horse's back. There was a beat, a pause that said more than either of them knew how to fill. Elias cleared his throat. "Sheriff Briggs was here yesterday." Rosa went still. "Said he's looking into an old case," Elias continued, careful. "Something to do with testimony from years back. About a land fire. Covered up names, missing files." She stood slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. "And he didn't say it, but he didn't have to. He kept circling your last name." Rosa crossed her arms. "That fire was 17 years ago." Elias nodded. "But some men don't forget what they're paid to remember." She looked out at the fog, the way it swirled like smoke. "He's not just here for old papers." "No," Elias agreed. "He's here for you." She didn't flinch. "Then let him come." Back at the house, Delilah sat at her desk, a folded letter in her hand. The seal was cracked, the ink faded, but the name was clear: Johann Navarro. Maisie stood in the doorway, quiet as a shadow. "I remember this," Delilah murmured. "He was a soldier, fought at Fire Ridge, gave testimony after the Valley Blaze. But his statement was sealed, buried under court records." Maisie nodded. "Rumor was they threatened his family." Delilah pressed her fingers to her temple. "The girl's his daughter." "Only surviving one," Maisie said. "Her mother died in the drought. Her sister's sickly." Delilah looked out the window toward the paddocks. "She's living under my roof, working my land. And I didn't see it until now." Maisie hesitated. "What are you going to do?" Delilah's voice was low. "Figure out if she's here by chance or by design." Later that afternoon, Rosa found herself summoned to the big house. The message came by way of a stable boy. "Miss Delilah wants a word." Rosa wiped her hands, tied her braid tighter, and made her way up the stone path. Every step felt heavier than the last. Delilah waited in the parlor, the fire burning low, casting the room in gold and shadow. She didn't offer Rosa a seat. "I know who you are," she said, cutting straight through the silence. Rosa's hands stayed at her sides. "Then we can skip the dance." Delilah rose slowly, letter still in hand. "Your father's testimony put half this valley in flames, and the other half in mourning. Good men lost their land because of what he said." "My father told the truth," Rosa said, her voice even. "Truth that was sold, some say." Rosa stepped forward. He was forced, threatened. You know how these men work. Delilah's eyes narrowed. I know exactly how they work. Which is why I'm asking you now, what are you doing here, Rosa? Did Briggs send you? Did someone put you up to this? No one sent me, Rosa snapped. I came to work. I came to earn a bed and bread. I didn't know this ranch was sitting on the bones of my father's nightmares. They stood in a long silence. Then Rosa added quietly, I didn't come here to burn anything down. I came because I needed to keep my sister alive. That's it. Delilah watched her closely, searching her face for lies. After a moment, she folded the letter and set it down. You'll stay in the loft above the barn from now on, for privacy. And because I can't have this house whispering. Rosa nodded once. Fine. And Rosa Delilah added, if I find out you're lying to me. I'm not, Rosa said, turning toward the door. But if I were, you'd already know. She left without slamming the door. But it may as well have been a shot across a canyon. That night, Rosa moved her things to the barn loft, 3 dresses, a scarf, a small carved box, and an old photograph of her father in uniform long before he became a ghost in the margins of county records. She stood in the cold light of the oil lantern, staring down at the picture. You didn't start the fire, she whispered. But you never got to say that out loud, did you? She tucked the photo into her coat, just as a knock echoed on the loft rail. Elias. He climbed halfway up, then stopped. You okay? I've been worse. He nodded. She told you. She asked if I was a snake in the grass. And what did you say? I told her snakes don't peel potatoes. He huffed a laugh. Good answer. She leaned against the rail. She's protecting you. This land. This name. I know, Elias said. But names aren't always what they seem. She tilted her head. Neither are people. Another pause. Then Elias said, Rosa, what if I told you I don't care what your father did, I care about what you're doing now? She met his eyes. Then I'd say be careful, because I'm not finished figuring that out myself. They stayed like that, watching each other in the cold, quiet dark. Something had shifted, and they both knew it. The distance between them wasn't built of fear anymore. It was built of history. Down below, the horses stirred. Somewhere in town, a lawman oiled his rifle and lit a fresh cigar. The past was waking up, and it had a long ride ahead. The knock on the saloon door came just after closing. One sharp rap, then 2 slow ones, like the code of someone who didn't want to wait, but couldn't afford to be loud. Briggs looked up from his drink, the smoke from his cigar curling around the rim of his glass. He didn't move right away, just stared through the haze as if deciding whether it was worth the trouble. When the knock came again, more insistent, he finally stood. He opened the door to a wiry man in a tan coat, slick with trail dust, and eyes too twitchy for peace. The man stepped inside quickly. You're late, Briggs said. The man nodded, removing his hat. Had to ride wide around 3 Cross. They're watching the roads now. Briggs poured him a drink without asking. Did you find it? The man pulled a rolled packet from his saddlebag. It was wrapped in wax cloth and tied with a strip of rawhide. I had to dig through 3 county boxes in a storage barn outside Rust Hollow. You were right, it was buried deep. Briggs untied the bundle and spread it open on the saloon table. Inside were copies of depositions maps and a faded page with a familiar signature at the bottom. Johann Navarro. Briggs's lip curled. There it is. He tapped the signature with the butt of his cigar. He lied, the man said. or he was made to. Doesn't matter, Briggs replied. He's dead. But his daughter's not. At the ranch. Rosa woke to the sound of someone coughing hard. It took her a moment to realize it wasn't Lita. It was her own lungs, dry and tight from the barn dust and cold air. She sat up in the loft, wrapped her coat tighter, and rubbed her face with her hands. It had been 3 nights since her conversation with Delilah. The tension hadn't softened, it had just gone quiet. And quiet was sometimes worse. She climbed down from the loft and stepped outside, boots crunching over the frost-laced dirt. The sky was still bruised with dawn, not yet ready to wake. She was halfway to the pump when she saw Elias already there, filling 2 buckets. "You're up early," she said. He looked over. "Habit," she nodded. "You always haul your own water, only when I don't trust anyone else to do it right." She smirked, stepping beside him to grab a 3rd bucket. "Guess I'm still on probation, huh?" He didn't answer. Just passed her the bucket, and together they walked toward the house in silence. Once they reached the porch, Elias stopped. "There's something I need to ask you." Rosa turned. "All right. I want to take you into town." Her brow furrowed. "Why?" "There's a box of my father's old papers in the archive house. Might be something there about the fire, about your father. But I need you there when I read it." She hesitated. "You trust me with that. I trust you more than anyone else around here. And I think we're both tired of guessing." She studied his face. There was no game in his eyes. Just a man tired of walking in circles. "All right," she said. "But if this brings more trouble than it solves, I'm blaming you." He smiled. "Fair enough." They rode out at noon, Rosa on a borrowed mare and Elias on his black quarter horse. The trail to town was mostly clear, though the winter melt had carved deep gullies along the side paths. They rode quietly, passing old stone markers and fence posts half swallowed by grass. Rosa hadn't been to the archive house since she was a child, before everything burned, before her father came home with hands shaking and eyes hollowed out by truths no one wanted him to tell. The building sat squat and unremarkable on the edge of town, its windows shuttered and its roof patched in tin. Inside, the smell of mold and parchment hit like a fist. A clerk nodded them through, barely looking up. The back room was lined with wooden filing cabinets, some marked with chalk numbers, others missing labels entirely. Elias led her to the oldest cabinet and began pulling drawers. It took an hour before he found it, a thick envelope marked Fire Ridge, 17 YRS Prior. He laid the contents out on a table. Newspaper clippings, survey maps, a burnt-edged letter, and one notarized testimony. Rosa stared at the handwriting. It was her father's. She read it once, then again. Each time her throat closed tighter. "He didn't lie," she whispered. "They made him name someone. He didn't want to, but they said if he didn't, they'd call him complicit. Said they'd arrest him." Elias scanned the lines. He named 3 men. "He gave them the ones already dead," she said. "The ones who couldn't speak back. It was the only way he could protect the ones still alive." Elias tapped the corner of the page. "This last name, Cartwright. That's Sheriff Briggs's uncle." Rosa's eyes widened. "So that's it. Briggs has been covering his family's shame, or trying to rewrite it." Before they could process it further, the front door of the archive slammed open. Briggs. He stepped into the room, hand resting on his sidearm. "Well, well," he drawled. "A little field trip." Elias didn't move. "You been following us?" "Only the girl," Briggs said. "She's been a thorn long enough." "You're not the law here," Elias said. Briggs shrugged. Law's just who's left standing at the end of the argument. Rosa stepped forward, holding up the testimony. This proves your uncle helped start that fire. Briggs's eyes darkened. That's hearsay from a traitor. My father wasn't a traitor. He was a scapegoat. You weren't supposed to see that, Briggs growled. None of you were. Elias stepped in front of Rosa, voice hard. You touch her, you answer to me. Briggs looked between them, eyes sharp. Then he smiled. So that's how it is. Rosa didn't flinch. I didn't survive a fire just to burn again. Briggs stepped back slowly. You just made yourself a target, Navarro. You both did. He turned and walked out. Rosa let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Elias looked over. You all right? She nodded. We got what we needed. No, Elias said. Jaw clenched. We got what he didn't want us to have. That's different. As they rode back to the ranch, the wind picked up again. The sun sank lower behind the hills, painting the land in deep gold and rust. Rosa rode silently for a while, then said, That testimony doesn't change the past. No, Elias agreed. But it might change what happens next. Ahead of them, the ranch came into view. Its fences strong, its shadows long, and somewhere in that darkness, Briggs was already planning his next move. The rain came down hard that night, sheets of it pounding the rooftops, turning the ranch roads into rivers of mud, the kind of storm that erased footprints and buried secrets under a wash of noise. Rosa stood at the window in the loft, arms folded tight across her chest, staring out at the dark. Each flash of lightning lit up the paddocks and the long stretch of fence leading toward the eastern gate. Elias had barely spoken since they returned from town. He'd handed Delilah the testimony in silence and walked off without waiting for her to say a word. Rosa hadn't followed him. Some things a man needed to carry alone. Now, hours later, she still hadn't slept. The words on that old page kept replaying in her head, her father's name, Briggs's uncle, the lie that had swallowed her family whole, and the look in Briggs's eyes when he realized the truth was finally loose. He wouldn't wait long to strike back. Just before midnight, someone banged on the barn door. 3 hard knocks. Rosa grabbed the rifle stashed behind the feed barrels and crept to the edge of the loft. Rosa, came a voice, hoarse, panicked. It was Miguel, the stable hand. She bolted down the ladder and unlatched the door. Miguel stumbled in, soaked and wide-eyed, blood on his sleeve. They took her, he panted. Who, your sister? Her heart dropped. When I was walking past your place, Lita was outside on the porch, coughing. 2 men came up from behind, threw a sack over her and took off in a wagon. One of them was wearing a deputy star. The world tilted. For a split second, Rosa couldn't breathe. Did you see where they went toward the south road? I tried to follow, but they fired a warning shot. Clipped me. Rosa didn't hesitate. She grabbed her coat, jammed shells into the rifle, and raced to the house. Elias was already outside, shirt half-buttoned, pistol at his side. I heard he said, I'm coming with you. No. This is mine. I don't care, he snapped. You're not riding into a trap alone. Maisie emerged behind them, handing Rosa a saddlebag of ammunition and a flask of whiskey. You've got maybe an hour's lead on 'em tops. Delilah appeared next, face grim. If it's Briggs, he's heading to the old rail station. There's a holding cabin out there no one uses anymore. He'll want her out of sight until he can spin it legal. I'm not letting him spin anything, Rosa growled. Delilah held out a leather satchel. Bring this. Rosa opened it. Inside were more documents. Maps, letters, old land ledgers. Proof. Why, Rosa asked. Because it's time this town chose who it belongs to, and they won't do that without truth in their hands. Rosa mounted the horse before the rain could slow her down. Elias right beside her. As they galloped out the south trail, mud flying and thunder crashing around them, Rosa's jaw clenched tighter with every mile. He doesn't want justice, she said. He wants silence. Elias nodded. Then we make noise. The old rail station came into view just before dawn, a rotted husk of wood and rusted nails tucked between dead trees. The wind howled through its bones. They dismounted in silence and approached low. Through a crack in the wall, Rosa spotted two men, one of them Briggs, pacing. The other sat at a table near the stove rifle across his lap. In the far corner, Lita was tied to a chair, blindfolded, shaking. Rosa's breath hitched. "You circle left," she whispered. "I'll go right." We hit him at the same time. Elias nodded and vanished into the dark. Rosa crept forward, boots silent over wet leaves. Her pulse thudded loud in her ears. One wrong move and Lita would pay the price. Inside, Briggs muttered, "I'll hold her till the papers disappear. Maybe she goes missing permanent. Who's gonna ask questions? She's nobody." Rosa's rage surged. "You sure about that?" she said loudly, stepping into the doorway. Briggs turned, startled. "Well, hell." Lita whimpered behind the gag. Rosa leveled the rifle. "Let her go." Briggs chuckled. "You're brave when you think you got the high ground." "Not brave," she said. "Just done running." The other man stood lifting his rifle, but Elias burst through the side window, knocking him down before he could aim. Rosa kept her rifle on Briggs. "Let her go," she repeated. Briggs stepped back slowly, hands raised. "You gonna shoot me in front of your sister?" "No," Rosa said. "She doesn't need to see that. But I'll shoot you for everything you did to my father. You got no proof." "I've got plenty," Elias said, tossing the satchel onto the table. "Your uncle's name, your threats, all signed and sealed." Briggs's mouth tightened. "You think this town'll believe you?" he snarled. "I don't care if they do," Rosa said, "because I will, and I'll make damn sure they hear it anyway." Outside, hoofbeats approached. Riders. Maisie, Delilah, and 3 ranch hands arrived just in time to see Briggs being tied to a chair with his own belt. Delilah dismounted and strode inside. She looked at Lita, then at Rosa. "You good?" Rosa nodded. "Better than him." Delilah looked at Briggs. "You should have left her alone. You should have known some things don't stay buried." Briggs spat on the floor. "You're protecting her now." Delilah's voice was ice. "She's earned more loyalty in a month than you have in a lifetime." They brought Briggs back to town in chains. By the time they reached the square, half the county had gathered, some with disbelief, others with quiet satisfaction. Rosa stood beside Elias as Delilah read the testimony aloud, her voice clear and unflinching. The crowd listened in stunned silence. When she finished, Rosa stepped forward, eyes sweeping the faces around her. "My father died a liar in your eyes," she said. "But he told the truth, and I'm not letting that truth rot in the ground with him." She locked eyes with the mayor. "So what's it gonna be, justice or tradition?" No one spoke for a long moment. Then a woman stepped forward from the crowd. The old Navajo elder Rosa had defended in town weeks ago. She raised her hand and said, "Truth," and slowly others nodded. Rosa's voice didn't tremble when she said it. "You can't kill the truth, Briggs. You can only delay it. But now it's got a voice and it's mine." And this time no one told her to be quiet. The dust hadn't even settled around the courthouse when the letters started arriving, sealed, formal, thick with legal threat. One came from the county judge's office, another from a family name Rosa recognized from land deeds her father once studied late at night by candlelight. Some were warnings, some were accusations, none were offers of peace. Delilah McRae stood in her study reading them one by one, her jaw tight as fence wire. "They smell blood," she muttered, tossing a letter into the fire. "Not because of what we did, but because of what we exposed." Elias leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "They think it'll scare us back into line." Delilah didn't look at him. "This town's been built on silence. Now it's creaking." Outside the ranch moved like it always did, cattle-fed fences, mended boots, scraping wood and dirt. But Rosa could feel the shift in the wind. Eyes lingered longer. Conversations hushed when she passed. Some of the girls in the bunkhouse stopped talking to her altogether. And yet there was also something else. The Navajo elder who'd spoken out at the courthouse, her name was Tala. She came to the ranch that morning, a basket in her hands. Inside was bread salt and a woven charm made of corn husk and horsehair. "For protection," Tala said. "You speak loud. Now you must listen." Rosa accepted the gift with both hands. Later, Elias found her sitting behind the stables, the charm resting in her palm. "You all right?" he asked. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Feels like I lit a match and now I'm standing in the dry grass, waiting." He sat beside her. "It's not your fire." "I struck it, didn't I?" "You struck it because it needed to be struck." She turned to him, finally asking the question she'd been carrying since the courthouse. "Do you think the people here will forgive me?" Elias hesitated, then said, "No." Rosa looked away. "But I don't think forgiveness is the point," he added. "You didn't come here to be liked, Rosa. You came to tell the truth, and truth doesn't always leave space for comfort." She exhaled long and slow. "You always talk like that." "Only around you," he said with a grin. That night, the barn lights flickered in the wind. Rosa climbed the loft ladder after dinner, but sleep didn't find her. Lita had been quiet since the abduction, more fragile, more withdrawn. Rosa didn't blame her. Trauma had its own way of planting roots in silence. Near midnight, there was another knock. This time, it was Maisie. "There's a rider at the gate," she said. "Wants to speak to you." Rosa followed her outside, heart thudding like it always did now when someone said her name in that tone. The rider was a woman, mid-40s, dark braids, a coat stitched with tribal symbols Rosa didn't recognize. Her face was lean and steady, and her eyes were the same shade of brown Rosa saw in the mirror every morning. "I'm looking for Rosa Navarro," she said. "I'm Rosa." The woman dismounted. "My name's Inez. I rode from Burnt Mesa. I knew your father." Rosa blinked. "You knew him. We fought together back when the land grabbers started torching the hills to force our people out. Your father testified, but before that he rode with us, helped hide families, delivered supplies, risked everything." Rosa's throat tightened. "He never talked about it. Because talking would have gotten people killed," Inez said. "But after what you did in court, people are remembering. They're asking questions again. Some good. Some dangerous." Rosa swallowed hard. "Why are you here? To warn you," Inez said. "You didn't just pull up roots here. You cracked something bigger. There are old men with land titles signed in fire who don't want any more pages turned. Are you saying they'll come after us?" "I'm saying." Inez replied that there's more writing on your voice than just your father's name. Rosa took a deep breath. Then I guess I'd better keep using it. Inez nodded, approving. Good. Because we're not done fighting either. Before she left, she handed Rosa a folded map marked with places Rosa had only heard whispered about: refuge valleys, water caches, hidden crossings, where folks fleeing the old flames were said to have vanished safely. If the pressure comes, Inez said, don't wait to run. There's more of us out there. You won't be alone. After she rode off into the night, Elias stepped from the shadows. He'd heard most of it. You gonna leave? He asked. Rosa looked at the map. Not unless I have to. She said there's more people like you. There's more people like us, Rosa corrected. People who got tired of living quiet under someone else's boot. Elias didn't answer right away. Then, I used to think silence was what kept this land from falling apart. That if we just kept things steady, the dust wouldn't rise. And now, he smiled faintly. Now I know dust is the only thing that ever tells the truth around here. Rosa stared out into the night. They want me gone, Elias. Not because of what I did, but because of what I might still do. They're scared of you. Then let them be. The next day, Rosa rode into town alone. She walked into the records office and dropped the map Inez had given her on the counter. The clerk blinked. What's this, a petition? Rosa said. To reopen the investigation into the Fire Ridge burnings, with land recovery claims for the families who were displaced. The clerk stared at her. You think the county will listen? No. Rosa said, clear and steady. But they'll have to respond. Outside, whispers followed her like wind, but for the first time in her life, she didn't bow her head. Back at the ranch, Elias stood with Delilah on the porch, watching her return. She's becoming something bigger than this place, he said quietly. Delilah didn't respond right away. Then finally, so were you, before you decided to play it safe. He looked down, then back toward Rosa. Maybe it's not too late. Delilah's voice was soft. Not if you ride beside her. Not behind. As Rosa dismounted, she caught their eyes and nodded once. A storm was coming, but this time she wouldn't be waiting it out. She'd be riding into it, with fire in her chest and her father's truth in her hands. The morning Rosa returned from town, the wind carried a different kind of silence across the ranch, tight, watching, unsettled. The hands kept working, but no one laughed. No songs hummed over the fences. The chickens barely scratched. Even the horses were restless, shifting in their stalls like they smelled something coming. She didn't have to ask what was wrong. She saw it in the way Maisie wouldn't meet her eyes, in how Miguel stopped sharpening his blade mid-motion when he saw her ride in. It was the kind of quiet that came before a fight. Delilah met her on the porch, arms crossed, mouth drawn. We got word this morning. Briggs didn't stay in lockup long. His brother, Judge Cartwright, signed a release order under procedural concerns. They let him out before dawn. Rosa didn't blink. Of course they did. He's not back in town. No one's seen him. Which means he's either hiding or he's planning something. Rosa said. Delilah nodded. You need to be ready. I already am. Rosa turned to go check on Lita, but Delilah called after her. You think you lit the fire? But girl, they're the ones who poured the oil. Inside the bunkhouse, Rosa found Lita curled under the quilt, thin as a reed, her cheeks flushed with fever. The doctor had been by, but supplies were low. Half the medicine carts had stopped making ranch visits after the trial. Too risky, they said. Rosa changed the wet cloth on her sister's head and tucked the charm Tala had given them under the pillow. Just a little longer, she whispered. We're almost out the other side. But deep down she knew they weren't. Not yet. Later that day, Elias rode out to check the southern border. When he came back, his face was hard. "There's a wagon out past Smoke Tree Ridge," he said, "covered in tarps, sitting quiet, like it's waiting." For what, Rosa asked. For night. That evening, the sun went down slow, and angry, thick clouds stained orange and violet, as if the sky itself had bruised. Rosa stood with Elias, Maisie, and Delilah near the stable gates where the land opened wide to the valley. She was dressed in her oldest work clothes, no frills, no color, just dark cloth and a rifle strapped to her back. Delilah handed her a pistol, loaded with iron, not questions. Rosa took it without a word. "What if he comes with deputies?" Maisie asked. "Then they'll have to choose," Delilah said, "between their job and their soul." The ranch settled into silence again, but this time it was a held breath, coiled bracing. And then the dogs started barking. First one, then two. Then the whole line broke into howls. The wagon rolled into view a minute later, pulled by 2 mules and flanked by 4 riders. One of them was Briggs, his long coat dusted with trail grime, a shotgun slung casually across his saddle. He stopped just beyond the fence line. "Evenin'," he called out. Delilah stepped forward. "You're trespassing." Briggs smiled. "No law here says I can't visit old friends." "Don't mistake this house for one of yours," Delilah said, voice like steel. He dismounted, slow, stretching like a man who'd just taken a nap, not escaped justice. "I heard you've been stirring up all kinds of things," he said, looking straight at Rosa. "Petitions, witnesses, little revolutions." Rosa didn't flinch. "I'm just finishing what you tried to bury." Briggs chuckled. "You think a few papers and a sob story make you powerful? No," she said, stepping forward. "But the truth does. And I've got more than enough of it now." Briggs's face darkened. "Let me tell you something, girl. This land, it was built by men like me. Men who weren't afraid to get dirty to do what had to be done." "And what had to be done was murder?" Rosa asked. "It was survival," he barked. "Fire Ridge. That was about securing the valley. Your father was just a pawn too dumb to see the game. He saw it just fine," she snapped. "He just refused to play it your way." Behind her, the ranch hands had gathered, lining the porch, the gates, the fence. Some held tools, others rifles. None ran. Briggs looked at the crowd and spat. "Y'all siding with her, with this little scrap picker who thinks she's got God on her side," a voice called out from the back, Tala's. "She's not alone, and she's not wrong." Then Miguel spoke up. "We remember Fire Ridge, and Maisie. We remember who came back and who didn't." Briggs sneered. "You people don't have the spine for a real fight." Rosa stepped up to the fence line, eyes locked on his. "We're not fighting you, Briggs. We're burying you. With memory, with truth, with every name you erased." He grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. Big words for someone who's standing on stolen land. Rosa leveled her rifle. "Then maybe it's time we take it back." The moment stretched like wire pulled too tight. Briggs looked around once more at the silent crowd, the armed hands, the woman who had once stood in the shadows, now standing in front of the ranch, unmoving. He spat on the ground, climbed back on his horse, and barked, "Let's go." His men hesitated, confused. Now he shouted. They turned, and the wagon rolled back into the dark. No one moved for a full minute after. Then someone let out a breath. Rosa lowered the rifle. Delilah approached her quietly. "That wasn't the end." "I know," Rosa said. "But it was the beginning of the end." Rosa nodded, eyes still on the horizon. "He wanted to make me afraid," she said. but he forgot one thing. "What's that?" Elias asked behind her. Rosa turned to face them all. "He made me angry instead," and that she knew was a far more dangerous thing to do. The first shot came just before dawn. It cracked across the valley like a dry branch snapping in the cold, echoing off the canyon walls. Rosa jolted upright in the loft hand on her rifle before she was even fully awake. Below, the horses whinnied and kicked their stalls, spooked by the sound. Another shot followed, then another. She scrambled down the ladder and threw open the barn door. The sky was still indigo, the kind of color that lies between night and morning. But the flames weren't waiting for sunrise. One of the far sheds was on fire, orange and angry, licking skyward, like it had been holding its breath for weeks. Maisie came running barefoot from the bunkhouse, hair wild, shirt half-buttoned. "They said it," she panted. "Briggs's men snuck in from the ridge behind the canyon wall." Rosa didn't waste time asking how she knew. "Where's Lita?" "She's with Delilah." "Stable house." Rosa sprinted toward the blaze, Elias already ahead of her, dragging a pump hose toward the flames. The fire wasn't huge yet, but it was fast, and the shed held dry wood and old oil barrels. It would spread if they didn't stop it now. Two more hands joined them with buckets. The water was slow, the flames fast. Rosa soaked her bandana and tied it around her face, coughing as she moved closer, stomping a burning plank out with her heel. Another shot rang out, this one hitting wood. "Sniper!" Elias shouted, yanking her backward. They ducked behind a trough, smoke swirling around them. "That wasn't warning fire," she said. "No," Elias replied. "It was a message." They crawled toward the main house under cover, taking a long, wide loop through the corral fence. Rosa's heart pounded in her ears. It wasn't just the fire. It was the knowing that this wasn't random anymore. This was war. By the time they got back to the house, the fire had been mostly contained. Smoke drifted like low fog over the pasture. Delilah stood on the porch. Shotgun in hand, Lita curled in a blanket at her feet. Her face was pale, lips pressed tight. "He's forcing our hand," Delilah said as Rosa approached. "He wants us to strike first so he can bury us in court." "He's already burning us alive," Rosa snapped. "What else are we supposed to wait for?" Delilah didn't answer. Elias wiped his face with his sleeve. "We ride. We take what we've got, names, dates, testimony, and we go to the governor, in person." "You think the governor's gonna listen to some ranch hands?" Maisie asked, incredulous. "No," Rosa said, "but he'll listen to Delilah McRae." Delilah narrowed her eyes. "I haven't cashed in favors in 20 years. "Then maybe it's time," Elias said. "Because we're running out of buildings to burn." Delilah looked down at Lita, then out at the land. Finally, she nodded. "We leave tonight." They spent the day preparing, packing up documents, food, and supplies. Maisie helped Rosa gather the medical papers and Lita's birth records. Miguel offered to hold the ranch with the other hands while they were gone. "We've got our own bones buried here," he said. "We're not letting it go without swinging." As the sun dropped below the hills, casting the valley in molten gold, Rosa stood outside the barn, saddling her mare. She looked up at the old windmill, still turning slow in the breeze like it had seen all this before. "You ever think," Elias said, walking up beside her, "that maybe your father knew this day would come?" Rosa tightened the strap. "He didn't know how far it'd reach. Or maybe he did. Maybe that's why he tried so damn hard to keep quiet." "You still angry at him?" She paused. "No, not anymore. He told the truth and paid the price. I just wish he'd taught me how to carry it." Elias put a hand on her shoulder. "You're learning." She turned to face him. "You sure you want to ride with me? I'm not letting you go alone." Rosa's eyes softened. You're not who I expected when I got here. He smiled faintly. Neither are you. They mounted up Rosa, Elias, Delilah, and Maisie leading a small wagon behind them, with Lita wrapped in blankets in the back. The road to Santa Cruz stretched long and silent ahead, winding through the ridges and low plains like a ribbon of memory. They rode through the night, the stars bright overhead, coyotes yipping in the distance. At a high pass above Redwater Creek, they stopped to rest. Rosa stepped away from the group and looked out over the valley, the same valley her father had once tried to protect, the same one that nearly cost her everything. Elias joined her. You think the governor'll help? She asked. I think he'll listen. Whether he acts, that's up to him. And if he doesn't, Elias's jaw tightened. Then we find someone who will. They sat in silence for a long while. Then Rosa said softly, Used to believe the truth could fix things, that if you just shouted it loud enough, people would listen. Elias nodded. And now I know the truth doesn't fix anything, she said. It just shows you who's willing to keep breaking it. He looked at her. That's your choice now, Rosa. What to do with that truth? She didn't respond. Not right away. But something in her chest settled like a weight being reshaped, not removed. Behind them, the fire still smoldered back at the ranch. Briggs wouldn't rest. That much was certain. But neither would she. Tomorrow they'd ride into Santa Cruz and place the truth into hands with the power to act or the power to ignore it. And whatever came next, Rosa Navarro would not look away. Not this time. Because truth doesn't fix everything, but it does change the fight. They reached Santa Cruz at dawn. The city blinked awake in golden light, its stone buildings glowing warm despite the cold air. Wagons clattered over cobblestones. Market stalls were being lifted open like tired eyelids, and smoke from breakfast fires curled in soft spirals above the roofs. To most folks here, it was just another morning. To Rosa Navarro, it was the edge of a reckoning. They rode slow through the city streets, boots and hooves crusted in road dust, eyes sharp. No banners, no music, no crowd waiting to cheer them in. Just a worn-out wagon carrying a sick girl, a file of names and deeds, and 4 people who were too tired to be scared anymore. At the governor's office, they were stopped at the gates. You'll need an appointment, the clerk said, eyes scanning their clothes, their horses, the dirt under their nails. Delilah dismounted, pulled off her glove, and handed the clerk a card with a red stamp pressed into its center. The clerk's eyes widened, throat-catching. I'll get someone, he stammered. They were led into a side room, quiet, wood-paneled, with thick velvet drapes and walls that seemed to breathe money. Rosa stood by the window watching pigeons scatter from the church roof across the street. Lita slept in the chair beside her, a little color finally returning to her cheeks. Delilah paced. Elias leaned on the mantel, silent. Then the door opened, and in walked a man in a gray suit with silver in his hair, and a wariness in his eyes that said he'd seen more backroom deals than anyone ever should. You must be the ones who brought all the noise from Fire Ridge, he said. Rosa stepped forward. No, sir. We're the ones who brought the truth. He raised an eyebrow. Is that right? Delilah handed over the satchel. Inside, witness accounts, land theft maps, Navarro's buried testimony photos of the burned homes. Elias laid down the petition signed by over 300 people from the surrounding territories. The governor read in silence for a long time. When he finally looked up, his voice was low. If half of this is true, it is, Rosa said, and we've got graves to prove it. He stared at her a moment longer. Do you understand what you're asking me to do? We're not asking, Elias said. We're telling. You open this case again, you'll shake up half the old money in the state. You'll make enemies. Then let them show their faces, Rosa said. Some of us have had to live with ghosts long enough. He closed the file slowly. All right, I'll convene a hearing. Quietly at first. But if the evidence holds, it won't stay quiet for long. Delilah nodded. We're not afraid of noise. The governor looked at Rosa one more time. You're Navarro's girl, aren't you? She nodded. He always spoke the truth, he said, almost softly. But he never learned how to protect himself after. Rosa's eyes didn't waver. Then maybe it's time someone else did. They left the building lighter than they entered, but no less resolved. Justice wasn't promised. It never had been. But for the first time in years, it felt possible. Outside, people were starting to whisper. A few had heard already about the Fire Ridge girl, the daughter of the man who burned for someone else's crime. About the woman who stood in front of Briggs and didn't flinch. About the ranch that didn't fold when the fires came again. By the time they reached the stables, a small group had followed behind them, quiet and curious. Among them were young riders, old veterans, women holding children with soot-streaked cheeks. Survivors. Rosa turned in the saddle. You don't need to follow me, she said. I didn't do this for applause. An older man stepped forward. We know. That's why we are. Back at the ranch 2 days later, the world felt different. Not louder, not safer, just clearer. The truth was out there now, and it was moving faster than fire. Briggs had vanished again. Some said he fled south. Others said he was hiding in plain sight behind another badge, another name. Rosa no longer chased rumors. She'd seen enough shadows. Instead, she worked. She helped rebuild the shed, planted a new line of trees along the ridge, and at Lita's insistence carved her father's name into a smooth slab of sandstone and placed it at the base of the bluff where the fire never touched. One morning Tala returned. She brought seeds this time. Wildflowers. Native grass. You plant what you want, remembered, she said, and you pull what doesn't belong. Rosa nodded. That's what I've been trying to do, no? Tala said, smiling softly. That's what you've done. Later, Rosa sat by the fence post where her father once carved messages for travelers. The wood was old, worn smooth by sun and years. She took a knife from her pocket and carved 2 letters into the side. R.N. Beside her, Elias leaned on the fence. You ever think about leaving? He asked. She shook her head. I've been running my whole life. This land holds too much of me now. He looked out over the field where spring grass was just beginning to rise. You didn't fix it all, he said. I wasn't supposed to, she replied. But I didn't let it stay broken either. He nodded. That's enough. They sat for a long time watching the horses graze under the softening sky. I used to think truth was like a hammer, Rosa said, voice quiet. You swing it and it breaks things open. But now I think it's more like water. How's that? It doesn't break through all at once. It wears things down, finds cracks, soaks deep, changes what it touches. He thought about that. Then what's justice? She smiled faintly. Maybe it's just what grows after. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of dust hay and something sweeter, wildflowers, maybe already blooming where smoke had once curled. Rosa stood, brushed off her jeans. Let's get back to work, she said. And they did. That was the story of Rosa Navarro. Not a legend, not a hero. Just a woman who carried a heavy name, walked into fire, and chose not to stay silent. A woman who reminded a broken place that truth, when tended with care and courage, can root even in ash and bloom. And when the winds shift again, as they always do, someone will find the wildflowers growing on that ranch. And remember, truth never dies. It just waits for someone brave enough to carry it.